Ladies and gentlemen, people have been discussing what is next for the Cleveland Cavaliers. What does Cleveland do? Do they trade for Giannis? Do they bring back LeBron James? Do they trade James Harden away? Do they not re-sign him? Should they have ever traded for him to begin with? Do they trade Donovan Mitchell? What are they going to do? Should they fire Kenny Atkinson? Is what some people are asking, okay? All right, and you know, people are talking about all the problems Cleveland has, right? But to me, the biggest problem Cleveland has is not really being discussed that much. The biggest problem Cleveland has is their tallest player, Evan Mobley. He's not a great player. He's a good player who's sometimes great. And I think he needs to be a great player who's sometimes fantastic. And if he's not a great player who's sometimes fantastic, then he's a guy who is on an overly expensive contract, who doesn't live up to his full potential. Evan Mobley in the playoffs, let's go through that quickly. Let's go through Evan Mobley in the playoffs quickly, real quick. Toronto, 7-game series. Versus Toronto in a 7-game series, Evan Mobley shot 56% from the field, 39% from three, 65% on two-pointers, and he was making an average of 5.42s per game. Pretty decent, maybe even pretty good stats, right? Then in the Detroit series, 52% from the field, 33% from three, 62.5% from two, 4.2 twos made per game. His numbers dropped. He had an entire one game. Where he made more than 6 shots against the Detroit Pistons, and that was Game 7. Then against the Knicks, where Cleveland got swept, he shot 49% from the field, 28% from three. All right, his twos made per game went up. That's cool. His 2-point percentage went up. That's good as well. But it's not great. Evan Mobley was not great in the playoffs. He had a few games that were, you could maybe call great, but generally, he was what you would expect from Evan Mobley. He was 18-8. He needs to do more than that, especially considering Cleveland just gave him a super expensive contract after last season. Last year, he was all-defensive team. He was the defensive player of the year. He was an all-star. He was on the all-NBA team. This year, he wasn't any of those things. This year, he had no end-of-season awards. Nothing. So in addition to the fact that in the playoffs, most of the time he was nothing to even, just a basic average Evan Mobley stat line, nothing spectacular, not really stepping up in the playoffs. Beyond the fact that he was nothing special in the playoffs, he also didn't really take a leap in his game. He did not improve. He had no major improvements. He had no minor improvements. He stagnated. Maybe even he maybe even a little bit regressed. And that is not what you want from a guy who this season you paid $46 million. Next year, $50 million. The year after that, $53 million, $57 million, $61 million. They're going to be paying Evan Mobley $61 million in the 2030 season. That's crazy. And it's gonna look really bad if he continues to not improve. If Evan Mobley continues to not improve, this is going to be straight up an awful contract. Now, I want to just we've talked about the fact that he hasn't really improved, but I want to talk about his game specifically, what he does offensively, which I just can't stand sometimes, bro. I can't stand when the tallest player on the team is standing at the three-point line, not really in the paint, not getting the ball in the paint a lot, not dominating in the paint. And look, Evan Mobley can hit threes, okay? He's a pretty decent three-point shooter, especially for a center. but he's also the tallest player in Cleveland, who in some of these playoff games made 4 2-point shots. 4. 4. 4. That's crazy. I said this when talking about, in one of my videos recently, I was talking about Wemby was taking too many threes in one of these games against the Thunder. And I was like, unless your name is Karl Anthony Towns or Nikola Jokic, your team is probably going to benefit more if your center is in the paint more than he's at the three-point line. I said something like that, something to the effect of that. And I know Evan Mobley is technically the starting power forward, but if I'm not mistaken, he is taller than Jarrett Allen, and he also just is a center. He is a center, and he needs to be taking more twos. If Evan Mobley would just get the ball and be aggressive on offense and get in the paint and dominate in the paint, that would do Cleveland way more good than it would if he went 2 for 5 from the three-point line. All right? If he would just get the ball and dominate and focus on being dominant in the paint, and hey, maybe you take 1 or 2 threes. Maybe if you're really having a great night, you take 3 or 4. But the main focus should be to dominate in the paint for Evan Mobley. That should be the main focus because he's the tallest player on the floor. He's incredibly skilled. He's very talented. He just doesn't have the aggression, it seems like, to really dominate in the paint, and doesn't have, maybe this is Cleveland's offensive scheme, doesn't have the offense doesn't play to that. They don't play to Evan Mobley really being dominant in the paint on most nights. At least in the playoffs, they didn't. I mean, look at this. Look at this. Game 1 against the Knicks. 6 for 16. He made 4 2-pointers. He took 8 threes and only made 2 of them. What? That's just crazy to me. That's just crazy to me. But back to Evan Mobley's contract for a second. I just want to compare this to some of the players who he played in the playoffs. Scotty Barnes was picked 4th in the 2021 NBA draft. Evan Mobley was picked 3rd. Evan Mobley will be making $50, $53, $57, $61 million over the next 4 seasons. Scotty Barnes will be making $41, $44, $47, $51 million. That's crazy to me. That's crazy to me. Scotty Barnes is better than Evan Mobley. Just straight up, better offensively, better defensively. Scotty Barnes is just straight up better than Evan Mobley. Jalen Brunson, the guy who is the best player on the team that just swept Evan Mobley's team. Jalen Brunson, over the next few seasons, will be making $37 and $40 million. Evan Mobley makes $13 million more than Jalen Brunson per year. That is wild. Keep in mind, Evan Mobley is the 3rd option on the Cavs, which I don't think he should be. All right, I've stated I think he needs to be more aggressive on offense. He needs to dominate in the paint more. That should be his game. If that was his game, then he would be the 2nd option, right? 36-year-old James Harden should not be the 2nd option on this Cleveland Cavaliers team at all. But back to the point. That's the 3rd option on a Cleveland team that got swept in the conference finals, and the 3 seasons before that were 2nd-round exits, is making $13 more million than the Eastern Conference Finals MVP, a top 10 player in basketball. That's crazy, man. That's really crazy. If I was Cleveland, the first thing on my mind is, how do we trade Evan Mobley? Okay, because this is a really bad contract in my opinion. It really is. All right, so people are going to talk about James Harden and how he played bad in the playoffs, and he did play bad in the biggest moments of the playoffs. And people are going to talk about Kenny Atkinson and is he even a good coach, right? I think Evan Mobley and his stagnation and his massive contract are the biggest problems for Cleveland over whether or not James Harden's going to go 3 for 100 in a Game 7, or whether or not Kenny Atkinson thinks the series is analytically tied at 2-2 right now, and he's looking forward to Game 5. I think that Evan Mobley's stagnation is the biggest problem with the Cleveland Cavaliers.